Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Hub back into the video today, and today we're going to be going over potential early cut candidates for the Houston Texans going into the 2024 offseason. Since the Super Bowl ended Sunday, we saw the Kansas City Chiefs win the whole thing. Since then, we started to see some teams make some roster cuts. We saw the Steelers start this thing off the other day when they cut Mitchell Trubisky, and they also cut their punter and an offensive lineman. Then we saw the Bengals continue it with cutting quarterback A.J. McCarron. And then today, the Bears made some roster cuts, cutting a starting guard and also safety Eddie Jackson. So with maybe potential looming roster cuts for the Houston Texans, I want to talk about three potential roster cuts I think the Texans should potentially make to not only free up money going into free agency, which is pretty soon in a couple weeks, in about not 2 weeks, I think 3.5 weeks maybe. 3.5, 4 weeks. Free agency starts. I think free agency starts March 11th, or that's when teams can start negotiating with players. Free agency really starts on March 13th. It's currently February 16th. But we're gonna go over three players that I think the Texans should cut, but also we're gonna be naming some other players that might get cut that that I don't think the Texans should cut. So starting off, all three players I have on this list are offensive players. So let's get into it. These moves, the Texans are not only cutting up, saving up money, but they're also opening up some spots in the depth chart with some of these positions. All right, let's get into it. So starting off, we're going to talk about a big name. He didn't do much this season at all, but that's backup quarterback Davis Mills. I feel like this is the right move for the Texans to make, to get him an opportunity to get a better chance of playing somewhere else. Obviously, if he goes and signs somewhere, he's not going to go anywhere to be the starting quarterback. There is no team in the NFL that will sign him to be their starting quarterback, but I believe there are a couple teams in this league that would pick him up to be their backup and potentially have a decent chance of playing if that quarterback gets benched or injured. So I think it'd be best for the Texans to get rid of Mills for them and him. Mills last season threw 19 for 40. Last season 19 for 40 with 179 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. Really, the most he played was against the Cleveland Browns when the Texans played the Browns on New Year's Eve. Outside of that Cleveland Browns game, the rest of his performances throughout the season were, the rest of his games were just like end of the game where if the Texans were blowing anybody out, or we saw a couple times where C.J. Stroud had to leave the game. I'm thinking about, I believe we were playing the Arizona Cardinals. C.J. Stroud had to leave the game. He had to. They were checking if he had a concussion. Mills threw like a 14-yard pass or something, and C.J. Stroud came back in. Really, the most he played was in that Cleveland Browns game on New Year's Eve, where Case Keenum got benched and Davis Mills led the Texans to 2 touchdown drives. But outside of that, he really didn't play much. But he was the starting quarterback for most of the season in the 2022 season. I think he started 13 games for the Texans, or played in like 15 games and started in 13, I believe, in that 2022 season. And in his rookie year in 2021, he even started a little bit for the Texans, I believe. He started 8 games in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. But I just think it would be best for the Texans to move on from him and get a better backup quarterback. I don't know what happens with Case Keenum. I don't know if he stays as that emergency third quarterback, but I know that for the Texans, I know we all want C.J. Stroud to stay healthy, and I think it's something that very well probably will happen. But God forbid something to happen that we saw happen last season, where C.J. Stroud goes down. He gets a concussion. He misses 2 games. Thank God we survive against the Titans. Case Keenum, Dalton Schultz, and the rest of the defense did a great job in Tennessee. We get a win. We play the best defense in the league. We get crushed by them. 2 games without C.J. Stroud. Thank God we still make the playoffs. But if something were to happen like that again, I think we could be better off getting a better backup quarterback. We don't have to go out there and get a top tier backup quarterback, but I think we could bring someone in to be a backup quarterback that is more talented than Mills or Case Keenum. I don't really have any names in idea, but I think God forbid if anything were to happen to CJ where he has to miss a game or two again or longer, it would be great to have a better backup quarterback because I'm not going to say any quarterback could succeed in this offense because I don't think that's true. But I think there's enough weapons on this offense. C.J. Stroud's definitely great, but there's enough weapons on this offense for the Texans to manage to win a game or two, depending on the matchup, without C.J. Stroud. So I think to cut Davis Mills and go out there and get a better backup quarterback in case anything happens to C.J. would be great for the Texans. And then one of the next roster cuts I think the Texans should make and probably will make is cutting Robert Woods. One of the big reasons I think this move should happen is, number one, you're going to see some wide receivers brought in this offseason for the Texans, but I think another big reason why I think the Texans should make this move is we're paying him $8 million a year. I think the Texans overpaid for him to come here a little bit. That was the first move they made in the offseason. I think it was a good move. At the time, I really did. Woods did a solid job, but I think when Robert Woods was brought in, I don't think we were expecting, what Nico Collins did this season. When Robert Woods was brought in, I mean, I'm not going to say we didn't expect what we saw from Tank Dell this year because Tank Dell wasn't even a Houston Texan when Robert Woods was brought in. Tank Dell was still a Houston Cougar. So I don't know if the Texans, who knows, when Robert Woods was signed with the Texans, I don't even know if they were planning on drafting C.J. Stroud. So at the time, I think the Robert Woods signing was a really good signing because really he was really that only guy outside of Nico Collins in that wide receiver room. And to start off the year, he actually did a really good job with the Texans and was solid for the Texans when we needed him. But I look at the talent that this wide receiver core has now and how young they are. I look at just the guys that are under contract now. Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Xavier Hutchinson, and John Mechie. Those are four guys who are all capable of playing time. And I know for sure the Texans are going to add in talent at the wide receiver position, whether it's through the draft, it's through free agency, or it's through the trade market. I think the Texans are probably liable to add in two wide receivers this offseason, probably one through the draft and one through free agency or the trade market. I'm thinking about guys through the trade market and free agency like Mike Evans, Brandon Ayuk, those type of guys to potentially be brought in for another weapon for C.J. Stroud. But, I mean, yeah, I think, those are two guys early on in the offseason I think should be roster cuts are Davis Mills and Robert Woods. In the final one, I'm going with a offensive lineman. That's Kendrick Green. Didn't play much. Played a couple games. Got injured towards meniscus and was out for the rest of the season. So I don't think any. And also in the past with the Pittsburgh Steelers, when he was playing guard or center for them, he was not good at all. And when the Texans had him, he wasn't that great either. He's a cheap contract. He won't clear much money, but I think that spot could go to somebody else. And honestly, I'd love the Texans to go out there and go bring back Quisenberry, who we saw towards ACL early in camp last year. I love Quisenberry. We'll love to see the Texans potentially possibly bring him back. But those are the three guys right now I think are the early guys for me. I'd say let go. I think two guys who very well could end up getting cut. Number one, Jimmy Ward. I do not want that move to happen. I thought Jimmy Ward did a great job in the secondary for the Texans last year. He saved the game against the Denver Broncos with a game-winning interception, made other big plays for this Texans defense. He knows D'Amico, playing for San Francisco. He's a great veteran guy to have for some of these younger guys in the secondary. I think Jimmy Ward to stay. His contract for sure is higher, very, very high for his age, and definitely can clear a lot of money by cutting him. But I think he did a great job for the Texans this season. I wouldn't let him go. But another guy I think could get cut this offseason, and I would 100% say move on from him is that I believe we drafted him in the 5th round. He's a tight end, Tegan Quantanaro. He was in his second year, and in his rookie and second year, he has had so many injury problems, and I don't want to see the Texans go in a third year with this guy with the injuries he's had. He is talented when he is playing. He's a really good tight end when he is playing, but he is not playing more than he is playing. And I know he wouldn't get a lot of playing time when all the tight ends are healthy. I know Schultz is a free agent, but he wouldn't get a lot of playing time when all the tight ends are healthy with Dalton and Brevin and himself. But still, he was injured throughout a good part of the season, and I think that he won't clear a lot of money, but still, it'll open a spot up for us to bring in another tight end potentially. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on the potential roster cuts for the Houston Texans in the comment section, and peace out.